The sky was an inferno, the blazing flames consuming the building as panicked cries pierced the night air. Amid the chaos, a teenager named Jordan, just 16 years old, made a decision that would change his life forever. With nothing but a heart full of courage and an unshakable resolve, Jordan ran into the burning building to save an elderly man trapped inside, and what happened next moved the entire neighborhood. Jordan was just your average 16-year-old boy, living in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. He wasn't the star athlete at school or the class clown. Instead, he was known for his quiet demeanor, his knack for fixing things, and his unwavering dedication to his family. He lived with his mother, Angela, who worked tirelessly as a nurse, and his younger sister, Mia, who adored her big brother more than anyone else in the world. Life hadn't been easy for Jordan's family. Ever since his father passed away when he was 10, Jordan had taken it upon himself to help his mother keep their household running. Between school, part-time jobs, and caring for Mia, Jordan rarely had time for himself, but he never complained. He understood the value of family and the sacrifices his mother made every day. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind that passes unnoticed in the rhythm of daily life. Jordan had just finished helping his mom with the dinner cleanup, begrudgingly scrubbing dishes as she reminded him, yet again, to rinse them properly before stacking them in the rack. After much back and forth and his promise to do better, he grabbed his hoodie and told her he'd head to the corner store for a few things they needed. Bread, milk, and his favorite brand of chips were on the list, though the chips were more for him than the household. The cool night air greeted him as he stepped outside, a faint breeze brushing against his cheeks. The city buzzed around him in its usual way, the hum of passing cars, snippets of conversations from nearby apartments, and the occasional bark of a dog echoed in the distance. The streetlights flickered faintly, their glow illuminating the uneven sidewalk as Jordan made his way down Maple Street. His sneakers scuffed against the pavement with each step, his mind wandering to the upcoming basketball tryouts at school. Jordan loved basketball, but self-doubt had him teetering on whether to go through with the tryouts. He wasn't the tallest or the fastest player, and his jump shot still needed work. Tyler, his best friend, had been encouraging him for weeks, hyping him up in ways only a true friend could. Tyler believed in him even when Jordan struggled to believe in himself. As he replayed their last conversation in his head, a flicker of determination sparked within him, just enough to think he might give it a shot. As he turned the corner onto a quieter stretch of the street, his eyes landed on a familiar sight, the old brick building at the end of the block. It was a fixture in the neighborhood, its faded red facade and ivy-covered walls giving it an almost timeless presence. This wasn't just any building, it was where Mr. Walters lived. Mr. Walters was something of a mystery to everyone who lived nearby. He rarely left his home, save for when he shuffled onto the porch to feed the stray cats that seemed to view his house as their personal haven. Some whispered that he was a retired professor. Others thought he might have been a reclusive artist or writer. Most of the kids simply called him the grumpy old guy, convinced he was someone to avoid. Jordan, however, saw him differently. To Jordan, Mr. Walters was just a lonely man who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. This evening, though, something about the house was different. As Jordan approached, he noticed a thin column of smoke rising from one of the upstairs windows. At first, he brushed it off as someone burning incense or perhaps a chimney puffing out some residual soot. But as he got closer, the smell of smoke became undeniable, sharp, acrid, and growing stronger with each step. Jordan stopped in his tracks, his heart beginning to race. The smoke, once a faint wisp, was now thicker, curling out of the window and dissipating into the night sky. A chill ran down his spine as the realization set in. The house was on fire. Instinctively, he quickened his pace, closing the gap between himself and the building. His sneakers skidded on the pavement as he reached the front gate, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement inside. The porch light flickered ominously, casting long, jittery shadows across the overgrown grass. "Mr. Walters," Jordan called out, his voice sharp against the stillness of the night. The only response was the crackle of something burning inside the house. For a moment, Jordan hesitated. The sensible part of his brain screamed at him to run to the corner store and find help, but something else, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Tyler, urged him to act. Tyler's words from their last basketball practice echoed in his mind. "When the moment comes, you've got to take the shot. Don't hesitate. Just go for it." Summoning his courage, Jordan pushed open the rusty gate and stepped onto the pathway leading to the house. The grass brushed against his ankles as he approached the front door, the smell of smoke growing stronger with every step. His heart pounded in his chest, a steady rhythm of adrenaline and fear. "Mr. Walters," he yelled again, banging on the door. The sound reverberated through the wooden frame, but there was no answer. His mind raced. What if he's trapped? What if no one else notices the fire in time? Without giving himself a chance to second guess, Jordan reached for the door handle. The metal was warm to the touch, and as he turned it, a wave of smoke rushed out, stinging his eyes and filling his lungs. He stumbled back, coughing, but forced himself to push forward. The hallway beyond the door was dimly lit, the flicker of a lamp barely cutting through the haze of smoke. Shadows danced on the walls, and the air was thick and suffocating. Jordan squinted, his voice straining as he called out again, "Mr. Walters, where are you?" This time he heard something, a faint, muffled groan coming from upstairs. His pulse quickened as he turned toward the staircase. The banister was cool under his grip, but the air grew hotter with each step he climbed. "Hold on, I'm coming!" he shouted, his voice trembling but resolute. At the top of the stairs, Jordan's eyes landed on the source of the groan. Slumped against the wall at the far end of the hallway was Mr. Walters. His frail frame was barely upright, his head lolling to the side as if the effort to stay conscious was too much. "Mr. Walters!" Jordan yelled, rushing toward him. The old man's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused, but they lit with faint recognition as they landed on Jordan's face. "You!" Mr. Walters croaked, his voice barely audible over the crackling of flames somewhere deeper in the house. "Don't worry, I'm getting you out of here," Jordan said firmly, grabbing the man's arm and hoisting it over his shoulder. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking, but Jordan didn't stop. With every ounce of strength he had, he began to pull Mr. Walters toward the staircase. The moment Jordan saw the smoke and heard the faint cries for help, his body seemed to move on its own. His bag of groceries tumbled to the ground, forgotten, as adrenaline surged through his veins. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, matching the pounding of his sneakers on the pavement as he sprinted toward the burning building. He wasn't a firefighter, a paramedic, or even an athlete with superhuman reflexes. He was just a teenager. But in that moment, none of that mattered. The front door to the building stood ajar, a faint creak audible even over the growing roar of the fire. Smoke poured out in tendrils, curling like sinister fingers in the cool night air. Jordan hesitated for a fraction of a second, his mind racing. "This is crazy," he thought. "I'm not trained for this. What if something happens to me in there?" But then the distant cries reached his ears again, weak, desperate, and unmistakably human. He took a deep breath, pushing aside his fear. "I have to help," he muttered under his breath, his resolve solidifying. With a sharp tug, he yanked his hoodie over his nose and mouth to create a makeshift mask. "Mr. Walters!" he shouted as he stepped into the smoke-filled hallway. His voice echoed in the oppressive silence, each syllable carrying an urgency he didn't even know he possessed. The air inside was suffocating, thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning wood. His eyes stung, watering almost instantly, but he pressed on. The once familiar hallway now felt like a labyrinth. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the flickering flames that were spreading somewhere deeper in the building. Every step Jordan took felt heavier, the heat intensifying and the smoke pressing down on him like an invisible weight. "Mr. Walters!" he called out again, his voice hoarse from the strain. Then faintly, over the crackling of the fire, he heard it, a weak, raspy voice coming from the stairwell. "I'm here." Jordan's heart leaped. He turned toward the sound, his sneakers squeaking on the scorched floor as he moved as quickly as the smoky air would allow. Near the base of the staircase, he found Mr. Walters slumped against the railing. The elderly man's face was pale, beads of sweat dripping from his brow as he struggled to breathe. His chest heaved with each shallow inhale, and his hands trembled as he tried to steady himself. "You need to get out of here," Mr. Walters wheezed, his eyes wide with fear as they locked onto Jordan's. Jordan crouched down beside him, his own heart pounding like a drum. "We're both getting out of here," he said firmly, his voice steadier than he felt inside. He slipped Mr. Walters' frail arm over his shoulder, the weight of the man much heavier than Jordan had anticipated. The old man groaned in pain as they began to move, each step feeling like a monumental effort. "Stay with me, Mr. Walters," Jordan urged. "We're almost there." The fire roared louder now, its heat oppressive as it licked at the walls and ceiling. Jordan could hear the cracking of wood, the sound sending chills down his spine. The building was old, too old to withstand such an assault for long. As they made their way toward the door, a sudden crash behind them made Jordan flinch. A section of the ceiling had caved in, sending sparks and embers flying through the air. The hallway was now partially blocked, flames greedily devouring the debris. Jordan's breath hitched and he tightened his grip on Mr. Walters. "We're not stopping," he said aloud, though it felt as much a reassurance to himself as it was to the old man. Mr. Walters coughed weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You should have left me. I can't." "Don't say that," Jordan snapped, his determination flaring. "We're both getting out of here, and that's final." With renewed effort, Jordan pushed forward. The smoke grew thicker, clawing at his throat and lungs despite the makeshift barrier of his hoodie. His muscles screamed in protest as he half-dragged, half-carried Mr. Walters, the exit seeming impossibly far away. Finally, the faint glow of the open doorway came into view. Jordan felt a surge of hope, his steps quickening despite the burning in his legs. The fresh air outside seemed like a distant promise, a beacon guiding him through the suffocating haze. "We're almost there," he panted, his voice strained but determined. Just a little further. The last few steps were the hardest. Jordan's vision blurred, his strength waning, but he refused to give up. With one final push, they crossed the threshold, collapsing onto the porch as the cool night air hit them. Jordan gasped for breath, his lungs greedily taking in the oxygen they had been denied. Mr. Walters coughed violently beside him, his body trembling as he struggled to recover. But they were out. They were alive. Jordan looked back at the building, the fire now fully visible through the windows. Flames danced and crackled, consuming everything in their path. The sight was both terrifying and surreal, but Jordan felt a strange sense of triumph. He had acted. He had made a difference. Turning to Mr. Walters, Jordan placed a reassuring hand on the old man's shoulder. "You're safe now," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "We're going to be okay." Mr. Walters looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. You saved me," he rasped, his voice breaking. Jordan managed a tired smile. "You'd do the same for me, wouldn't you?" The old man didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said it all. And as the distant sound of sirens began to grow louder, signaling the arrival of help, Jordan knew that this was a moment he would never forget, a moment that had changed both their lives forever. The journey to the front door felt endless, every step a grueling fight against the oppressive heat and choking smoke. Jordan's arms ached from supporting Mr. Walters, and his legs trembled under the weight of each step. The air inside was almost unbearable, a thick, stifling cloud that stung his eyes and clawed at his lungs. The sound of flames crackling and wood groaning under pressure filled his ears, an ominous reminder that time was running out. Mr. Walters's trembling grip tightened on Jordan's shoulder, his labored breathing growing more ragged with every moment. "Don't stop," the old man wheezed faintly, as if sensing Jordan's exhaustion. "I won't," Jordan promised, though his own strength was waning. The front door felt like a distant goal, taunting him with its flickering glow as the firelight danced around them. Behind them, the fire raged on, its roar growing louder, consuming everything in its path. Jordan didn't dare look back. He couldn't afford to. All that mattered was moving forward, one step at a time, until they reached safety. "Almost there, Mr. Walters," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. The old man nodded weakly, his head drooping as if even that simple motion drained him. Jordan gritted his teeth, willing himself to keep going. He shifted Mr. Walters' arm more securely over his shoulder, ignoring the searing heat that seemed to close in around them. As they neared the door, a sudden crash erupted from behind. Instinctively, Jordan glanced back and froze for a split second. A section of the ceiling had given way, collapsing in a fiery explosion of sparks and embers. The sight was terrifying, but it also fueled a renewed sense of urgency. "We've got to move, now!" Jordan shouted, more to himself than Mr. Walters. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, Jordan pushed forward. His legs screamed in protest, and his lungs burned with each breath, but he refused to stop. The cool night air was so close he could almost feel it brushing against his skin. Finally, with one final burst of effort, Jordan and Mr. Walters stumbled through the doorway and out into the open air. The moment they emerged, the stark contrast between the suffocating heat inside and the crispness of the night outside hit Jordan like a wave. The escape didn't go unnoticed. A crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, their worried faces illuminated by the glow of the fire. The instant they saw Jordan and Mr. Walters, cheers and applause erupted, a sound that felt surreal after the chaos inside. "Over here!" someone shouted as a few neighbors rushed forward. They gently eased Mr. Walters from Jordan's grasp, guiding him to a safe distance from the burning building. The old man coughed violently, but he was alive. Jordan collapsed onto the grass nearby, his chest heaving as he gulped down the cool air. His lungs felt raw, each breath like fire, but it didn't matter. They had made it out. He stared up at the night sky, the stars partially obscured by the rising plume of smoke, and let the relief wash over him. "Kid, are you okay?" a voice asked, snapping Jordan out of his daze. He turned his head to see a neighbor kneeling beside him, concern etched on their face. Jordan nodded weakly, managing a small, breathless smile. "Yeah, I'm okay." His body was drenched in sweat, and his limbs felt like lead, but the sight of Mr. Walters sitting up, albeit shakily, gave him all the reassurance he needed. The fire truck's siren pierced the night air, growing louder as it neared. Moments later, firefighters poured onto the scene, hoses uncoiling as they moved with precision to contain the blaze. One of them approached Jordan, kneeling beside him. "You're the one who got him out?" the firefighter asked, nodding toward Mr. Walters. Jordan nodded, his voice barely audible. "He was trapped. I had to." The firefighter placed a firm hand on his shoulder, a look of admiration in his eyes. "That was brave, kid. Really brave. You probably saved his life." Jordan let the words sink in, a mix of pride and disbelief swelling in his chest. He didn't feel like a hero. He'd simply done what he thought anyone would do. As the firefighters worked to extinguish the flames, Jordan sat up slowly, his body still trembling from the ordeal. He glanced at Mr. Walters, who caught his eye and gave a small, grateful nod. "Thank you," the old man mouthed, his voice too weak to carry. Jordan smiled faintly, his heart pounding for a different reason now, a sense of accomplishment, of having done something that truly mattered. The fire continued to blaze behind them, a stark reminder of how close they had come to disaster. But Jordan couldn't help but feel that something extraordinary had happened that night. Not just the rescue, but the connection forged in the heat of the moment. And as he sat there, catching his breath, he realized that this night would stay with him forever, a testament to courage, instinct, and the unyielding drive to do what's right, no matter the odds. The fire department's arrival brought a sudden flurry of activity, their flashing lights illuminating the smoke-filled street as firefighters moved with practiced urgency. Paramedics quickly approached Jordan and Mr. Walters, guiding them to an ambulance parked nearby. Jordan could barely feel his own exhaustion as they wrapped a blanket around him and checked his vital signs. His focus was still on Mr. Walters, who sat on a stretcher with an oxygen mask pressed to his face, his frail body trembling from the ordeal, but alive. "Hang in there, Mr. Walters," Jordan said, his voice hoarse from the smoke. The old man turned his head slightly, his eyes glassy but filled with gratitude. A familiar voice cut through the noise. "Jordan!" Jordan's head snapped toward the sound and his heart sank at the sight of his mom, Angela, running toward him. Her face was a mixture of panic and relief, her steps quick as she closed the distance between them. When she reached him, she pulled him into a fierce hug, her hands gripping his shoulders as if to reassure herself that he was real, that he was okay. "What were you thinking?" she exclaimed, her voice cracking. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled back slightly to look at him. "You could have been killed." Jordan opened his mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. He hadn't stopped to think about the danger. He'd just acted. Before he could try again, Angela shook her head, pulling him close once more. "You're braver than I'll ever be," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and pride. Jordan felt a lump in his throat as he hugged her back. He had never seen his mom this emotional, and it hit him just how close he had come to not being able to share this moment with her. Around them, neighbors stood in small groups, murmuring about what had happened. The once quiet street was now abuzz with a mix of awe and disbelief. Some pointed to the scorched building, now a smoldering shell, while others glanced at Jordan, their faces reflecting admiration and gratitude. By the time the paramedics had finished their checks, the crowd had grown larger. Whispers of hero floated through the air, but Jordan felt uneasy with the label. He hadn't done it to be a hero. He'd done it because it was the right thing to do. As the night wore on, the fire was brought under control, and the last of the embers began to die out. Angela insisted on taking Jordan home, despite his protests that he was fine. She thanked the paramedics and firefighters profusely, her voice still shaking with emotion, before guiding Jordan to their car. The next morning, the magnitude of what had happened truly hit. Jordan woke to find his phone buzzing incessantly with messages and calls. His friends, classmates, and even teachers had heard about his actions, and word had spread fast. "Jordan, you're on the news." Tyler's voice crackled over the phone when Jordan answered one of the calls. "What?" Jordan asked, still groggy. "Turn on the TV, Channel 7!" Tyler said, practically shouting. Jordan stumbled into the living room, turning on the television. Sure enough, his face filled the screen, captured in a grainy clip from someone's phone as he emerged from the burning building with Mr. Walters. The headline at the bottom read, "Teen Hero Saves Elderly Man from Fire." "Jordan!" Angela called from the kitchen, appearing moments later with a mix of pride and worry on her face. "They're talking about you everywhere. Reporters have been calling since this morning. Before he could respond, a knock at the door startled them both. Angela opened it cautiously to find a local news crew on the porch, cameras and microphones at the ready. "Is Jordan here?" the reporter asked. "We'd like to hear his story." Angela hesitated, glancing back at Jordan. He nodded reluctantly, stepping forward. The next hour was a blur. The reporters asked questions about the fire, about Mr. Walters, about what had driven Jordan to act. Jordan answered as best he could, but he kept his responses humble. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said repeatedly, brushing off the praise. But not everyone was buying his modesty. By the time Jordan got to school later that day, he was greeted like a celebrity. Students clapped and cheered as he walked through the halls, and teachers pulled him aside to congratulate him. Even Principal Harris made an announcement over the PA system, calling Jordan an example of courage and selflessness. Jordan couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by all the attention. He appreciated the kind words, but part of him wished things would go back to normal. He hadn't set out to be a hero. He just followed his instincts. By the end of the day, Jordan found himself sitting on the bleachers at the school gym, finally catching a moment of quiet. Tyler found him there, sitting down beside him. "You good, man?" Tyler asked, handing him a bottle of water. Jordan nodded, letting out a long breath. "Yeah, it's a lot, you know." Tyler grinned, clapping him on the back. "That's because you're a hero, dude. Own it." Jordan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I don't feel like a hero. I just did what I had to do." "Exactly," Tyler said, his grin widening. "That's what makes you one." Jordan fell silent, letting the words sink in. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe being a hero wasn't about seeking glory or recognition. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was hard. As he sat there, watching the basketball players practicing on the court, Jordan felt a sense of calm wash over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He had done something that mattered, and that was enough. A week after the fire, life seemed to return to normal for Jordan, though the word hero still followed him everywhere he went. At school, classmates who barely knew him were suddenly greeting him in the hallways. Even the basketball coach had approached him, saying he was looking forward to seeing Jordan at tryouts. But Jordan didn't feel like a hero. He couldn't stop replaying the moments inside the burning building, the heat, the smoke, the fear that they wouldn't make it out. The memory was as vivid as ever, and yet it was something else that stayed with him. Mr. Walters' voice, trembling with gratitude as he held Jordan's hand tightly in the ambulance. One Saturday morning, as Jordan was working on his basketball dribbling skills in the driveway, a familiar car pulled up in front of his house. Out stepped Mr. Walters, looking much healthier than he had the last time Jordan had seen him. Angela stepped out onto the porch, waving to Mr. Walters. "Come on up, Mr. Walters," she called. "I've got some coffee brewing." Mr. Walters smiled and nodded, but his eyes were on Jordan. He slowly climbed the steps, holding a small envelope in his hand. Jordan paused his dribbling and joined them on the porch, his heart racing slightly. What could Mr. Walters want to talk about? "Jordan," Mr. Walters began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for me. You didn't have to, but you chose to put yourself in danger to save an old man you barely knew." Jordan shifted awkwardly, glancing at his mom. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said quietly. "No," Mr. Walters replied firmly. "Not everyone would have done what you did, and that's why I wanted to do something for you in return." He held out the envelope, and Jordan hesitated before taking it. Inside, he found a handwritten note and what appeared to be an old deed. The note read, "Dear Jordan, because of you, I have been given a second chance at life. I want you to have something that has been in my family for generations. A small piece of land just outside the city. It's nothing fancy, but I believe it could mean something to you in the future, just as it did to me. Thank you for reminding me of the goodness in this world." Jordan's eyes widened as he stared at the papers. "Mr. Walters, I can't accept this," he said, shaking his head. "This is too much." Angela looked equally stunned, but placed a reassuring hand on Jordan's shoulder. Mr. Walters chuckled softly. "You've already accepted it, my boy. That land has been sitting there for years, unused. It would make me happy knowing it's going to someone who deserves it, someone who has the courage and heart to do what's right." Jordan's throat tightened as he looked at the elderly man. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela invited Mr. Walters inside, and the three of them spent the morning sharing stories over coffee and pastries. Mr. Walters revealed pieces of his life that no one in the neighborhood had ever known, about his late wife, the dreams they once had for the land, and how he had let grief isolate him from the world. By the time Mr. Walters left, Jordan felt a deeper connection to the man he had saved. The deed in his hand was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of trust, gratitude, and the bond that had formed between them. Jordan's jaw hung open, his mind racing to process Richard's words. What? But why? He stammered, disbelief evident in his voice. Richard chuckled warmly, his gaze softening as he placed the folder with the official papers on the table between them. Mr. Walters has no immediate family. He's always felt a strong connection to this community, even if he didn't show it outwardly. After what you did for him, he knew you were the right person to entrust his home to. Angela let out a small gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes darted between the lawyer and Jordan, as if searching for a sign that this was some elaborate mistake. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's very real," Richard assured them with a nod. "The papers are all in order. The house is officially yours." For a moment the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Jordan could feel his mother's hand clutching his shoulder, steadying them both. His heart pounded in his chest, and a million questions swirled in his mind. "But why would he do this for me?" Jordan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard smiled, his eyes glimmering with a mix of admiration and understanding. "Because you showed him something he hadn't felt in a long time. Selfless kindness. You reminded him that there are people in this world who act out of genuine care for others, not for recognition or reward. That's a rare thing, Jordan." Angela's voice broke through the stillness. "But a house? This is so much, too much. How could we ever repay him?" Richard held up a hand, gently shaking his head. "Mr. Walters isn't looking for repayment. He told me, and I quote, 'Jordan saved my life. The least I can do is give him something that could change his.' This is his way of expressing gratitude, of paying it forward." Tears welled up in Angela's eyes, and she pulled Jordan into a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Jordan hugged her back, his mind still struggling to grasp the enormity of what was happening. The house on Maple Street, the very building he had run into without a second thought, was now theirs. The place that had once been a mysterious and somewhat intimidating part of the neighborhood was now a symbol of bravery, gratitude, and new beginnings. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Richard cleared his throat. "There's one more thing," he said, sliding another envelope toward Jordan. "Mr. Walters also wanted you to have this." Jordan hesitated before picking it up, his hand shaking slightly. He opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter inside. The paper was slightly yellowed, the handwriting neat and deliberate. "Dear Jordan, I'm not a man of many words, but I hope these few will convey what I need to say. You saved my life in every sense of the word, not just from the fire but from the loneliness and bitterness I had let consume me. You reminded me that there's still good in this world, and that kindness has the power to change lives. This house was once my sanctuary, and now I hope it becomes yours. Use it however you see fit. A place to call home, a stepping stone for bigger dreams, or even a space to share with others who might need it. Whatever you decide, know that it comes with my deepest gratitude. You have a bright future ahead of you, Jordan. Keep being the incredible young man you are, and never underestimate the impact of your actions. You've already changed one life for the better, mine. With all my thanks, Mr. Walters." Jordan's vision blurred as he read the letter, the weight of Mr. Walters' words settling deep in his heart. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, his hands trembling. "I don't know what to say," Jordan admitted, his voice choked with emotion. Angela placed a hand on his back, her touch comforting. "Just say thank you, sweetheart. That's all you need to say." Richard smiled as he gathered his briefcase. "Take your time. Mr. Walters wanted you to know that there's no pressure to make decisions right away. The house is yours to use as you see fit." As Richard left, Jordan and Angela sat in stunned silence, the weight of the moment settling over them. For the first time, Jordan felt the enormity of what his decision to act that night had truly meant, not just for Mr. Walters but for their family and their future. "I'm not sure I deserve this," Jordan finally said, looking down at the letter. Angela smiled, wiping away a tear. "You deserve it more than you know, Jordan. What you did was extraordinary, and now, this is your chance to keep making a difference." Jordan looked at his mom, then back at the deed and the letter on the table. For the first time in days, a small smile tugged at his lips. Maybe, just maybe, he could live up to the title of hero that everyone seemed so eager to give him. For a long moment, the living room was filled with stunned silence. Jordan sat frozen, staring at the folder on the coffee table as if it might disappear if he looked away. Angela, his mother, stood a few steps away, her hand pressed to her chest as though her heart might burst. The disbelief in her wide eyes mirrored the feelings racing through Jordan's mind. Behind the couch, a small head peeked out. Mia, Jordan's little sister. Her big, curious eyes darted between her brother and the lawyer, her expression full of wonder and confusion. "Wait," Jordan finally managed to stammer, breaking the quiet. His voice cracked slightly as the words spilled out. "Mr. Walters gave us his house? Like, the whole building?" Richard nodded, his kind smile unchanging. "The entire property, yes. He wanted it to go to someone who would cherish it. Jordan, your actions that night proved to him that you value community and family above all else. He sees you as the future of this neighborhood." Angela's legs seemed to give out beneath her as she sank onto the arm of the couch. Her hands trembled, clutching the fabric as though to ground herself in reality. This can't be possible," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've lived paycheck to paycheck for so long. A house? A whole building?" Mia finally found the courage to step out from behind the couch. Her small voice, innocent and brimming with curiosity, cut through the room. "Does this mean we'll have more room to play?" Jordan let out a breathless laugh, his emotions threatening to bubble over. He knelt down, pulling Mia close and ruffling her hair. "I guess it does, kiddo. Looks like you're getting your own room too." Mia's face lit up with pure joy. "My own room? Really? Can I paint it pink?" Jordan chuckled, nodding. "Sure, you can paint it whatever color you want." Angela looked at her son, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Jordan," she began, her voice breaking slightly, "I can't even wrap my head around this. What you did that night, you've changed our lives forever." He stood and moved toward his mother, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I just did what felt right, Mom. I didn't expect anything like this." Angela shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But you did it, Jordan. You didn't think twice about risking yourself to save Mr. Walters. That kind of courage, that kind of heart, it's rare. And now, this house, this chance, it's like a blessing I never thought we'd get." Richard cleared his throat gently, his gaze soft. "If I may," he interjected, "Mr. Walters would be pleased to see this reaction. He spoke highly of you, Angela. He knew how much you've sacrificed for your family. This house is more than just a gift. It's his way of ensuring you all have a brighter future." Angela nodded, her hand brushing away her tears as she stood. "Please thank him for us, Mr. Richard. I don't even know how to put my gratitude into words." Jordan looked back at the folder on the coffee table. His mind raced with possibilities, what this could mean for their family, their future. For the first time, he felt the weight of the responsibility that came with such a gift. "Mom," he said quietly, his tone thoughtful, "this is more than just a house. This is a chance for us to build something lasting." Angela smiled, her face softening. "You're right, Jordan, and we'll honor this gift by taking care of it, by making it a home filled with love and laughter." Mia tugged on Jordan's sleeve, her eyes sparkling. "Does this mean I can get a puppy too?" Jordan laughed, scooping her up in his arms. "Let's take it one step at a time, okay? First, we figure out the paint color for your room." The sound of their laughter filled the room, breaking the tension and spreading a sense of hope. For the first time in years, their future didn't feel like an uphill battle. It felt like a fresh start, a new chapter written with the ink of courage, kindness, and community. And as they stood together, Richard watching with a smile, the little family felt the weight of their struggles lift, replaced by the light of possibilities yet to come. Despite the overwhelming news about the house, Jordan knew he couldn't fully understand it until he spoke with Mr. Walters himself. The next day after school, he made his way to the hospital where the elderly man was recovering from smoke inhalation. The nurses greeted him warmly, their smiles filled with admiration. It was clear they already knew about his heroic act. "Room 204, one of them said, pointing down the hallway. "He's been asking about you." Jordan nodded, his heart pounding as he approached the door. When he stepped inside, the room was quiet, save for the soft hum of machines. Mr. Walters was propped up in bed, his frail frame supported by a stack of pillows. Despite his tired appearance, his face lit up the moment he saw Jordan. "Ah, my young hero," Mr. Walters said, his voice raspy but warm. Come in, come in." Jordan hesitated near the doorway, unsure of how to respond. "Mr. Walters, I don't know what to say. The house, the property. Why would you do something like this for us?" The old man chuckled softly, motioning for Jordan to take the chair beside his bed. "Come closer, son. Let me tell you a story." Jordan sat, leaning forward as Mr. Walters began to speak. His voice, though weak, carried a weight that demanded attention. "When I was your age," he began, "I lived in a small town where everyone knew each other. We didn't have much, but we looked out for one another. If someone's barn caught fire, The whole town would show up to rebuild it. We shared everything, the good times and the bad. That sense of community was everything to me. He paused, his gaze distant as if he were looking back through decades of memories. But as I grew older, I moved away, built a life of my own, and lost sight of those values. I became focused on my own comfort, my own success. I thought I didn't need anyone. I told myself I was better off alone. Jordan shifted in his seat, the weight of Mr. Walters' words settling in his chest. Years passed, the old man continued, his voice softening, and I realized how wrong I'd been. I had no family left, no close friends. The house became my fortress, and I shut the world out. I convinced myself that no one would care if I disappeared. Mr. Walters' eyes filled with emotion as he looked at Jordan. But then, that night, you showed me how wrong I was. You risked your life for an old man you barely knew. You didn't ask for anything in return, didn't hesitate. You reminded me of what it means to be part of a community, to care for others simply because it's the right thing to do. Jordan swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. I just did what felt right, he said quietly. And that, Mr. Walters said, his eyes shining, is why I chose you. You have a good heart, Jordan. I can think of no one better to carry forward what I've left behind. For the first time, Jordan truly understood the depth of his actions that night. It wasn't just about saving a life, it was about rekindling a sense of connection and purpose. Thank you, Jordan whispered, his voice barely audible. Mr. Walters reached out, his frail hand resting on Jordan's. No, son, thank you. You've given me hope that this world still has young people like you. Kind, selfless, and brave. Now make good use of what I've given you. Make it something wonderful. Jordan nodded, the promise heavy but welcome in his heart. The weeks that followed were nothing short of transformative for Jordan and his family. Moving into their new home felt surreal, as though they had stepped into a dream they never dared to imagine. The neighborhood buzzed with excitement over the extraordinary story of how a young boy's bravery had led to such a life-changing turn of events. Angela wasted no time turning the house into a welcoming home. The once neglected property was soon bursting with warmth and life. She painted the walls in bright, cheerful colors and adorned the porch with flower pots, inviting neighbors to stop by and share in their joy. The house quickly became a beacon in the community, a symbol of resilience and kindness. For Jordan, the transition was both exciting and overwhelming. Owning a property wasn't just about having a roof over their heads. It came with responsibilities he had never anticipated. Maintenance, repairs, and ensuring that the tenants in the adjoining apartments felt safe and valued were now part of his daily life. He quickly learned that being a homeowner meant stepping up in ways he hadn't imagined, but he embraced the challenge with determination. Amid the flurry of changes, Mr. Walters became a regular visitor, fully recovered and more vibrant than ever. He often stopped by with stories from his past. He and Jordan developed a bond that went beyond gratitude. Mr. Walters saw in Jordan the potential to carry forward the values he held dear: kindness, community, and responsibility. "You remind me of myself at your age," Mr. Walters said one afternoon as they sat on the porch sipping lemonade. "Full of dreams, but with a lot to learn. Just don't make the mistake I did. Always stay connected to the people around you." Jordan listened intently, soaking up the elderly man's wisdom. They talked about everything: life, dreams, and even the mistakes that shaped them. Mr. Walters became not just a mentor, but a cherished friend, someone Jordan could turn to for guidance. Meanwhile, the neighborhood rallied around the family. Neighbors offered their help, from fixing fences to organizing a housewarming gathering. The sense of community that had been reignited by Jordan's heroism now flourished, turning the house into a hub for connection and support. For Mia, the move was a dream come true. With her own room and space to play, she radiated happiness that made the house feel even more alive. Angela, too, seemed to glow with a newfound sense of hope, as though the weight of their struggles had finally lifted. As Jordan walked through the house one evening, hearing the laughter of his sister and the hum of conversation from the kitchen, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a house. It was a new beginning, a place where dreams could grow and a community could thrive. And as he sat down to jot notes in his journal, one thought stood out. This was only the start of a journey he couldn't wait to continue. Jordan never imagined the chain reaction his act of bravery would set off. What began as a life-saving moment turned into a source of inspiration for countless others. The story of the teenager who had risked his life to save Mr. Walters quickly spread beyond their neighborhood, capturing the attention of local organizations, charitable groups, and even national media outlets. People were moved by Jordan's courage and selflessness. Letters of encouragement flooded their mailbox, and the phone rang constantly with calls from reporters and well-wishers. But it wasn't just words of praise that came. It was also ideas for action. One day, a group of volunteers knocked on the door of the newly renovated home with a proposition. They had heard about Jordan's story and wanted to collaborate on a community outreach program based out of the building. Their vision was to transform part of the property into a hub for positive change, offering after-school tutoring for kids, free meals for families in need, and workshops on home safety to ensure no one faced the same danger Mr. Walters had. At first, Jordan was unsure. During their first meeting, he expressed his doubts openly. "I'm just a teenager," he said, looking around at the group of enthusiastic volunteers. "I don't know how to run a program like this." The room fell silent for a moment, but then Mr. Walters, who had accompanied Jordan to the meeting, spoke up. His voice was steady and filled with conviction. "You've already shown you have what it takes to lead, Jordan. Leadership isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about having the heart to make a difference. This is just the next step." The group nodded in agreement, and their encouragement bolstered Jordan's resolve. He realized that while he might not have all the skills needed to manage such a program, he wasn't alone. There were people who believed in him, who were ready to guide and support him. Together, they began drafting plans for the outreach program. Local businesses offered donations, from school supplies to food, while neighbors volunteered their time to tutor, cook, and organize activities. The community came alive with a renewed sense of purpose, all sparked by one young boy's courageous act. Over the next few weeks, the building transformed yet again. One of the larger rooms became a makeshift classroom, complete with desks and whiteboards. Another area was converted into a dining space where meals could be served. Flyers went up around the neighborhood, inviting families to participate and contribute. Jordan found himself stepping into a role he never anticipated, a leader. With the help of Mr. Walters and the volunteers, he learned how to delegate tasks, communicate with donors, and inspire others to join the cause. The outreach program officially launched on a sunny Saturday afternoon. The turnout exceeded everyone's expectations. Children laughed as they worked on crafts, parents shared stories over warm meals, and neighbors came together in a way Jordan had never seen before. As he stood in the midst of it all, watching the ripple effect of his actions unfold, Jordan felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. What had started as a single act of kindness had grown into a movement, proving that even the smallest spark of bravery could ignite a fire of change. 6 months after the idea took root, the community outreach program officially opened its doors, and its impact was nothing short of transformative. The tutoring sessions gave children a newfound confidence in their schoolwork, turning struggling students into eager learners. Families facing food insecurity received not just warm meals, but also groceries to carry them through the week. Elderly residents, often forgotten by society, found companionship and support in the workshops and gatherings. The building, once a forgotten structure in the neighborhood, had become a vibrant hub of activity. Its walls echoed with laughter, learning, and the chatter of neighbors building relationships. It stood as a powerful symbol of hope, a testament to what could happen when a community came together. Jordan's life changed too. Though he was hailed as the hero who sparked this transformation, he remained grounded. He often deflected praise during interviews, insisting, "This isn't about me. It's about what we can achieve when we work together as a community." His humility only inspired others further, proving that one person's courage could lead to collective action. Mr. Walters, a regular at the center, watched with pride as his once crumbling property became the heart of the neighborhood. "Jordan has given this building a soul," he said one evening, his voice filled with emotion. For Jordan, the most rewarding part was seeing the joy on the faces of those the program served. The ripple effect of kindness had not only uplifted individuals, but strengthened the bonds between neighbors, creating a brighter future for everyone. The program wasn't just about providing services. It was about empowering people to believe in their potential and reminding them that, together, they could overcome anything. On the 1-year anniversary of the fire, the building was abuzz with celebration. Neighbors, friends, and even local officials gathered to commemorate the day that had brought the community closer. The air was filled with laughter, the scent of freshly baked goods, and the warm hum of conversation. For Jordan, it was already a special occasion, but he had no idea just how unforgettable the day would become. As the event reached its peak, Mr. Walters, looking spry despite his age, stepped onto the makeshift stage with a microphone in hand. The crowd hushed as he began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying a mix of gratitude and pride. "A year ago, I faced a moment that could have been my last, but because of one brave young man, I'm standing here today." The crowd erupted in applause, and Jordan, standing near the back, felt his cheeks flush. "But Jordan didn't just save me," Mr. Walters continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "He saved this community. His courage and selflessness have transformed not only this building, but also the lives of so many here. And today we're here to honor him." He gestured toward Jordan, motioning for him to come to the stage. Hesitant but encouraged by the cheers of the crowd, Jordan made his way forward, his heart pounding. Mr. Walters placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder as the crowd parted to reveal two surprises: a gleaming new bike and a banner announcing the creation of the Jordan Scholarship Fund. The fund, designed to support local students who demonstrated acts of exceptional kindness, bore Jordan's name as a lasting legacy. For a moment, Jordan was stunned. He looked at the bike, then at the crowd, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he finally managed, his voice breaking. This means so much to me, but I couldn't have done any of this alone. This is our story, not just mine." The crowd erupted in cheers once more, and as Jordan looked out at the faces of his neighbors, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. This wasn't just a celebration of the past, it was a promise of all the good that was yet to come. Jordan's journey is a testament to the power of bravery, compassion, and community. What started as a single act of courage blossomed into a legacy of kindness that transformed countless lives. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in Jordan's shoes? Let us know. Let us know. Let us